After 3 years of infertility, my husband and I tried IVF for a year. Finally, I successfully got pregnant with quadruplets. The pregnancy was brutal. I threw up for months, and my belly swelled up like a giant balloon. The doctor suggested reducing the number of fetuses for my own safety, but my husband refused instantly. "Scarlett, they are all our babies. I can't bear to lose a single one of them." Pale and exhausted, I touched my belly and nodded. I couldn't bear to let them go either. When I was 6 months pregnant, my husband's bros set up a betting pool on the babies' genders. It turned out to be 3 boys and 1 girl. My husband won the bet and made $10 million. Later, I accidentally overheard a conversation between Carter and his friends. "Carter, your plan was pure genius. You got Scarlett to carry babies for 4 different women at the same time." Carter's voice was indifferent. "Since I can't give them the title of Mrs. Sterling, the least I can do is give them a child. Scarlett is occupying the position, so this is her duty." My blood ran cold. The 4 babies inside me, none of them were mine. "Carter, you're amazing. You solved the kid problem for 4 women in one go," Tyler chimed in. "And the mothers are all gorgeous. The kids are going to be stunning." Tyler sighed. "It's a pity about Delilah. She was our college sweetheart. Who would have thought she'd die of a terminal illness so young? But you're a good man, Carter. You left her a child. We just have to wait for Scarlett to give birth. Sienna is also crazy about you. She's loved you for nearly 20 years. Since she couldn't have you, she begged for your baby." Another guy added, "Too bad your heart only belongs to Celine. That's why you came up with this plan to put all the embryos in Scarlett's womb. That way you don't betray Celine, and everyone gets what they want." "But what happens if Scarlett finds out? If she realizes none of the 4 babies in her belly are hers? She'll probably lose her mind, right?" Carter's voice remained cold and detached. "So what if she knows? She only has herself to blame for taking a spot that doesn't belong to her." The others laughed. "True. Even if she finds out, she'll probably just swallow her pride and give birth anyway. After all, they're still your kids. Scarlett worked so hard to marry into the Sterling family. She's like a stray dog you can't kick away. No matter how mad she gets, you just need to wiggle your finger, and she'll come crawling back." They burst into laughter, their words dripping with malice and mockery. Standing behind the door, a wave of icy coldness rushed from the soles of my feet to the top of my head. I looked down at my heavily swollen belly. My nails dug deep into my palms. What did they mean? The babies inside me weren't mine? I had suffered for 6 months. I threw up every day, my feet were too swollen to fit into shoes, and my hair was falling out in clumps. And before that, there was a whole year of IVF. Countless needles, endless hormone pills. After all that pain, the babies I was carrying belonged to other women? The conversation in the living room continued, but I couldn't hear anything anymore. I knew Delilah. We went to the same college. She was Carter's first love. When I heard she passed away from an illness recently, I actually felt sorry for her. Now she was dead, but her child was growing inside my body. It was so absurd that a terrifying chill crept up my spine. I forced myself to breathe, holding back the urge to scream and storm out. Outside, they were already betting on the babies' genders. Hearing Carter's voice mixed in with the laughter made me shudder. We had been married for 3 years, and I realized I didn't know the man sleeping next to me at all. I touched my stretched, tight belly. There were 4 babies inside. 1 belonged to Delilah. 1 belonged to Sienna. What about the other 2? I knew Sienna too. She was Carter's childhood friend. She had been secretly in love with him for years. I guess Carter was a real saint. He couldn't give her his heart, so he gave her a baby instead. I suddenly started laughing, but the tears kept falling. If Carter wanted to give them babies so badly, why did he make me carry them? How could he be so cruel? I clenched my fist so hard my knuckles turned white. My lip was bleeding from biting it so hard. I used to think Carter's constant worry and care during my pregnancy was a sign of his love for me. All the prenatal vitamins he bought, all his gentle reminders, I thought it was sweet. It was all a lie. The loud voices and laughter continued outside. I bet on 2 boys and 2 girls. I bet all 4 are boys. Then a sweet high-pitched female voice rang out. Why are you all betting on boys? I think girls are great. I bet 3 girls and 1 boy. She turned to Carter. Carter, do you prefer boys or girls? The voice was familiar. It was Celine, Carter's secretary. Carter replied casually. I like both. Boys are easier. Girls are too fragile. Tyler teased. So Carter, what's your bet? Since Celine likes girls, I'll bet 3 boys and 1 girl. Celine. So she was the 3rd woman. I smiled bitterly. They were carrying on right under my nose, and I was completely blind to it. I didn't know if they were brilliant actors, or if I was just incredibly stupid. Celine whined. What do you mean girls are fragile? Carter chuckled and pulled her into his arms. Aren't you? Who was the one crying because she was too scared of the pain of childbirth? You cried several times just during the egg freezing process. But it does hurt. Celine pouted, then added, "Oh, by the way, Scarlett never seems to cry. Those IVF needles are so long, and she did it for a whole year. Did she really never cry once?" Carter snorted. "Scarlett is thick-skinned. She doesn't feel pain like you do. She never cried. Not like you, crying over a tiny scratch." Tyler flattered. "That's because Celine has Carter to spoil her. Only girls with someone to protect them get to be fragile. Girls with no one to love them, like Scarlett, just have to suck it up." Exactly. Carter only put the embryos in Scarlett's womb because he didn't want Celine to go through the pain of pregnancy. Scarlett's belly is as big as a beach ball now. Gross. I wonder what she'll look like after popping out 4 kids. She was already plain. Carter wouldn't even look at her naked anyway. Now, their vulgar jokes and disgusting laughter made me want to throw up. I stumbled back 2 steps, my face completely pale. Thick-skinned? So I didn't feel pain? Of course I felt it. But because I thought I was carrying our babies, I endured it. No matter how much it hurt, I never made a sound. Even when my nails broke from clenching my fists. Even when my mouth was filled with the taste of blood, I stayed silent. But my endurance was brushed off as being thick-skinned. I remembered the day the IVF succeeded. Carter held my hand, his face filled with worry. "You suffered so much for our babies, Scarlett." He would touch my belly and speak to the unborn fetuses. "Be good in there. Don't torment your mom." When I was throwing up and couldn't eat, he would feed me spoonful by spoonful. "You have to eat something. You've lost so much weight. Once they are born, I'll make sure to scold them for making you suffer." It turned out his worry was fake. His care was only for the babies. I was nothing but a breeding machine to him. I closed my eyes, wiped away my tears, and called the clinic to schedule an abortion. "Carter, I'm done with you. And these babies you are so eager for? I'm not giving birth to them." By the time I walked out, Tyler and the others had already left. Only Carter and Celine were in the living room. I intentionally made some noise to give them time to pull apart. I couldn't confront them yet. Celine's face was flushed. She was pretending to report some work to Carter. "Mr. Sterling, there's an urgent meeting tonight. The car is waiting outside." She turned to see me and put on a warm smile. "Mrs. Sterling." Her eyes landed on my huge belly, a smug, knowing smirk playing on her lips. "Your belly looks even bigger today. You are so blessed to carry quadruplets for Mr. Sterling." Looking at her fake face, I didn't even have the energy to respond. Seeing my cold reaction, Celine excused herself. But before she left, she gave Carter a lingering look. It was a secret signal. Carter noticed me coming out of the guest room on the first floor. He frowned slightly, his voice carrying a hint of suspicion. "When did you get back? Why didn't you make a sound?" I looked at his lips, which still had a faint trace of her lipstick. My eyes stung. It was so obvious. How had I been so blind before? I smiled mockingly at myself and lowered my eyes. I was exhausted when I got back, so I fell asleep in the guest room. I just woke up. Carter seemed to breathe a sigh of relief. His expression returned to normal. "How was the checkup today? I promised to go with you. But something came up at the office." He sounded so guilty. I used to believe that guilt. I used to comfort him, telling him his work was more important, and that I was fine going alone. But I would never believe him again. It went well. The doctor said the babies are very healthy. Carter asked a few more detailed questions before relaxing. He always asked for details in the past. I thought it was because he cared about me. Now I knew who he really cared about. Carter walked over and rubbed my belly, talking to the babies for a while. In the past, I would have smiled happily at this scene. Now my heart was bleeding. I clenched my fists to keep myself calm, but the tears still threatened to spill over. Carter didn't notice my distress because he simply didn't care. "I have an emergency meeting tonight and might be back late. Take care of yourself." I forced a smile and nodded. "Okay." After Carter left, I walked up to the second floor, holding the handrail. My belly was so big that I couldn't see my feet, which was why I had moved to the guest room on the first floor after my 5th month. I hadn't been to our master bedroom in a long time. When I pushed the door open, I saw the messy sheets and the lingering scent of sex on the bed. On the wall behind it hung our wedding portrait. How ironic. My chest ached so badly that I couldn't stop the tears. But I forced myself to stay calm, wiped my face, and gathered all my personal documents. Before going back downstairs, I walked to the window and looked down. The car parked at the gate hadn't left yet. It was rocking violently. I closed my eyes, a wave of nausea hitting me. In the middle of the night, Carter came back. He smelled strongly of Celine's perfume. He reached out and gently stroked my belly, his movements careful and reverent. I felt sick to my stomach. I pretended to be asleep. Memories of our past flashed through my mind, and my tears soaked into the pillow. I still couldn't understand why he did this. But it didn't matter anymore. The next morning, I went to the hospital. The doctor looked at me with a deep frown. "You are almost 7 months pregnant. Terminating a pregnancy at this stage is extremely dangerous. I don't recommend a late-term abortion." My face was expressionless as I made up a lie. After a series of examinations and assessments, the surgery was scheduled. When I got home, I was completely drained. The surgery was in 3 days. I had 3 days to prepare everything. And I was going to leave Carter a grand parting gift. The morning sun crept through the sheer linen curtains of the guest bedroom, casting long, pale bars across the floorboards. I sat on the edge of the mattress, my swollen ankles aching, my hands resting atop the heavy, taut sphere of my belly. For 6 months, every kick had felt like a miracle. When the ultrasound technician first pointed out the 4 tiny, fluttering heartbeats, I had wept so hard the paper sheet beneath me soaked through. I thought my body, broken by 3 years of failed cycles and scarred by dozens of egg retrieval needles, had finally performed an impossible blessing. None of them are yours. The words echoed in the silence of the room, cold and sharp as surgical steel. I pulled out my laptop, my fingers steady despite the ice running through my veins. Carter had always believed I was technologically illiterate, a meek, grateful homebody who only cared about nursery colors and organic purees. Didn't know that before I married him, before I let his family convince me that my sole purpose was to provide the sterling bloodline with an heir. I had graduated at the top of my class in data analytics. I logged into his cloud backups through the mirrored account I had quietly linked to his tablet 2 years ago. It took me less than 40 minutes to find the encrypted folder labeled Project Legacy. The files inside were organized with sickening corporate precision. Embryo A, Carter Sterling and Delilah Vance. Embryo B, Carter Sterling and Sienna Montgomery. Embryo C, Carter Sterling and Celine Croft. Embryo D, Carter Sterling and Vivian Moore. I stared at the 4th name on the screen. Vivian Moore, the daughter of the Moore Logistics conglomerate, the very company holding the primary distribution contracts for the Sterling Group. Vivian was 42, divorced, and had lost her uterus to cervical cancer 5 years ago. Carter hadn't just played the benevolent patriarch to his dead ex and his lovesick secretary. He had turned my womb into a commercial currency. He had sold a quarter of my physical capacity to secure a multi-$100-million maritime shipping deal. Below the donor profiles lay the legal contracts drafted by Carter's private attorney. Every single document was signed with a forged copy of my signature. The surrogate, Scarlett Sterling, voluntarily surrenders all maternal rights, physical claims, and postpartum contact regarding the infants in exchange for a private settlement upon the legal dissolution of marriage. The date on the divorce filing attached to the back was already stamped for 3 weeks after my projected due date. He had planned everything. He was going to let me endure the agony of a quadruplet delivery, let my abdominal muscles tear and my organs shift under the massive weight, and the moment the babies were cut from my body, he was going to serve me with divorce papers, kick me out of the estate with a non-disclosure agreement, and distribute the newborns to his mistress, his childhood admirer, a dead girl's grieving parents, and a billionaire shipping heiress. I leaned over the side of the bed and dry heaved into the trash bin until my ribs screamed. When the spasms finally stopped, I wiped my mouth with the back of my hand, sat upright, and looked at my reflection in the vanity mirror. The pale, weeping, desperate woman who had begged for her husband's scraps of affection was gone. In her place was a ghost. And a ghost has nothing left to lose. Over the next 48 hours, I moved with terrifying efficiency. I contacted Victoria Chin, a ruthless, top-tier medical fraud and family attorney who had built her career dismantling corrupt elite dynasties. When Victoria saw the clinic files, the forged consent forms, and the audio recordings I had extracted from the living room security hub, her face went from professional curiosity to dead white. "This isn't just medical malpractice, Scarlett," Victoria whispered over an encrypted video call, her pen trembling against her legal pad. "This is felony, human trafficking, non-consensual medical experimentation, and grand fraud. If this goes to a federal prosecutor, the clinic will be shut down by sunset, and Carter Sterling will face 20 years in a federal penitentiary." "Not yet," I said softly, my voice devoid of any tremor. "If we file quietly, his father's legal team will bury it under private arbitration and NDA payouts. I don't want a settlement, Victoria. I want him destroyed." "What do you need from me?" "I need an emergency court order sealed under medical emergency provisions to grant me full, unilateral custody and surgical autonomy over my body, bypassing spousal consent," I said. "And I need a secured, private surgical suite at St. Jude's Specialty Center reserved under a pseudonym for Thursday night." "You're sure about the termination?" Victoria's voice softened with genuine concern. "At 27 weeks, carrying quadruplets. The physical toll on you, the physical toll of carrying 4 parasites placed inside me by a monster will kill me anyway," I replied, looking down at my hands. "Every second they move inside me, I feel like a walking coffin." I want them out. Consider it done, Victoria said. What about the Sterling 30th anniversary? Gala on Thursday evening. A slow, cold smile touched my lips. I'm going to give my husband the celebration he deserves. When I stepped out of the guest room on Wednesday afternoon, the main villa was bustling with decorators, florists, and caterers. Carter had spared no expense. The entire high society of the city had been invited to celebrate his 30th birthday, the Sterling Group's quarterly revenue surge, and the official public announcement of his miracle quadruplets. Sienna Montgomery was standing in the foyer, directing two workers carrying a massive, crystal-encrusted bassinet. She wore a backless emerald silk dress, her diamond earrings catching the sunlight. When she saw me waddling toward the kitchen, leaning heavily on the banister, her lips curled into a mixture of pity and triumphant disgust. "Oh, Scarlett," Sienna purred, walking over with a glass of champagne in hand. "Look at you. You look like you're about to pop. You really shouldn't be walking around. If something happens to Carter's precious cargo, you wouldn't be able to forgive yourself, would you?" I looked at her face, the flawless skin, the arrogance of a woman who thought she was getting a bespoke infant crafted from her DNA without a single stretch mark on her hips. "You seem very invested in these babies, Sienna," I said mildly, pouring myself a glass of room-temperature water. Sienna laughed, a high, tinkling sound. "Well, Carter and I go back 20 years. His children will practically be my own. In fact, Carter already agreed that I'll be the godmother to the little girl. I've already decorated the nursery in my penthouse with antique French lace. The little girl, Delilah's child, or Celine's child, or her own, she didn't even care, as long as she had a piece of Carter Sterling to parade around her social circle." "How generous of you," I murmured. Just then, Celine walked in from Carter's home study, holding a stack of leather-bound guest registries. She was wearing a subtle pearl-pink suit, her cheeks flushed, her neck bearing a faint, poorly concealed bruise right beneath her collar. "Mrs. Sterling," Celine said, her voice dripping with sweet, submissive mockery. "Mr. Sterling asked me to make sure you have your hair and makeup team scheduled for tomorrow afternoon. He wants you looking presentable for the press photos. He mentioned that your face has been looking a bit bloated lately." "Thank you, Celine," I replied, meeting her gaze evenly. "You've been taking such good care of Carter's needs lately. I really don't know what he would do without you." Celine's eyes flickered with a brief, nervous flicker of guilt before her arrogance reasserted itself. "Just doing my job, Mrs. Sterling." I took a slow sip of my water, watching the two of them exchange a smug, knowing glance behind my back. They thought I was an animal in a pen. They thought I was an empty husk counting down the days until they could harvest what was inside me and throw the rest away. "Enjoy your champagne, ladies," I thought, looking out the panoramic window at the manicured lawns. "Tomorrow night, you'll be drinking ash." Thursday evening arrived with a violent autumn downpour, the rain lashing against the floor-to-ceiling glass walls of the Grand Starlight Ballroom downtown. Over 400 guests, politicians, hedge fund titans, real estate moguls, and media executives filled the chandelier-lit hall. Diamond necklaces sparkled under the spotlights, string quartets played soft Mozart, and waiters in white tuxedos carried silver trays of beluga caviar and vintage Dom Perignon. Carter stood at the center of the VIP terrace, looking immaculate in a custom Tom Ford tuxedo. He held court among his fraternity brothers and board members, his laughter booming across the room. Beside him stood Vivian Moore, looking regal in navy velvet, chatting animatedly with Carter's father, Richard Sterling. On Carter's other side, Celine hovered with an iPad, pretending to manage the schedule while her fingers subtly brushed Carter's lower back whenever the cameras turned away. Sienna sat at the front table with Delilah Vance's elderly parents, who were clutching framed photographs of their deceased daughter, weeping soft, sentimental tears. At 8:30 p.m., the master of ceremonies tapped the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, esteemed guests," the MC announced, his voice reverberating through the surround sound system. "Please welcome the chairman of the Sterling Group, Mr. Carter Sterling, and his lovely wife, Scarlett Sterling, for the official family presentation." The double mahogany doors at the rear of the ballroom swung open. The room fell into an appreciative hush as I stepped into the light. I had refused Carter's stylist. Instead of the modest, loose-fitting maternity smock he had ordered me to wear, I wore a bespoke, midnight black silk gown that hugged every single contour of my colossal, stretched belly. The fabric was dark as a starless night, stark and dramatic against my pale skin. My dark hair was pulled back into a severe, elegant chignon, my lips painted a deep blood red. I didn't look like a fragile, pathetic incubator. I looked like an executioner walking up the steps to the scaffold. Carter's eyes narrowed slightly as I approached the stage, a flicker of irritation crossing his handsome face. He leaned down as he took my arm, his fingers digging with bruising force into the soft flesh of my elbow. What the hell are you wearing? He hissed beneath his practiced, charming smile, his teeth barely parting. You look like you're attending a funeral. I told you to wear the pastel dress. Don't worry, Carter, I whispered back, matching his smile with one of my own. A smile so cold it made his grip falter. Black is the only appropriate color for tonight. He stepped up to the crystal podium, pulling me to his side with an arm wrapped possessively around my waist. He tapped the microphone, exuding the effortless charisma of a man who believed the world belonged to him. Thank you, everyone, Carter began, his voice smooth, warm, and resonant. Tonight marks 30 years of the Sterling Group's legacy. But more than that, tonight is a celebration of life. As many of you know, my wife Scarlett and I have spent 4 long years praying for a family. And through the grace of God and modern medicine, we have been blessed not just with one child, but with 4. A collective murmur of applause and sentimental sighs rippled through the high society crowd. Delilah's mother dabbed her eyes with a lace handkerchief. Sienna raised her champagne glass with a triumphant grin. Vivian Moore nodded with corporate approval. To my wife Scarlett, Carter continued, turning to look down at me with an expression of profound, romantic tenderness that would have won an Academy Award. You have endured so much pain, so many needles, so many sleepless nights. To carry our legacy, there are no words to express my gratitude. As a token of my love, I have prepared a short retrospective of our journey over the past year. Carter gestured to the audiovisual technician at the back of the hall. Roll the video. The massive 60-foot LED screen behind the stage flickered to life. Carter turned toward the audience, his chest puffed out, waiting for the soft acoustic music and the curated ultrasound photos to draw tears from the board members. Instead, the screen blared with a sharp, piercing screech of audio feedback. The acoustic guitar never played. Instead, a crystal-clear, high-definition audio recording ripped through the $500,000 sound system, shattering the crystal silence of the ballroom. Carter, your plan was pure genius. You got Scarlett to carry babies for 4 different women at the same time. The voice belonged to Tyler. The entire ballroom froze. Waiters stopped mid-pour, champagne spilling over linen tablecloths. Carter's smile stiffened, his head snapping toward the technician booth. What the hell? Cut the feed. The technician didn't move. Victoria Chen's private cybersecurity team had locked down the venue's master server 20 minutes ago. The audio roared on, louder, clearer, filling every corner of the room. Since I can't give them the title of Mrs. Sterling, the least I can do is give them a child. Scarlett is occupying the position, so this is her duty. Carter's own voice echoed off the vaulted ceilings, cold, arrogant, and merciless. Gasps of horror erupted from the front tables. Turn it off, Carter roared, lunging toward the AV console on the side of the stage. Turn it off right now. The screen didn't turn off. It split into 4 massive high-resolution panels. Panel 1. The complete genetic analysis from the Apex Fertility Institute, showing the DNA matching. Fetus 1. 50% Carter Sterling / 50% Delilah Vance. Fetus 2. 50% Carter Sterling / 50% Sienna Montgomery. Fetus 3. 50% Carter Sterling / 50% Celine Croft. Fetus 4. 50% Carter Sterling / 50% Vivian Moore. Maternal match for Scarlett Sterling. 0%. Panel 2. The forged signature consent forms, accompanied by forensic handwriting analysis certificates stamped by the Federal Bureau of Investigation. Panel 3. The $10 million betting ledger, complete with Tyler, Carter, and the fraternity circle's digital signatures, placing bets on whether the stray dog would pop out boys or girls. Panel 4. The hidden camera footage from Carter's home office, Carter pinning Celine against his desk beneath our wedding portrait, laughing as he muttered, Scarlett is thick-skinned. She doesn't feel pain like you do. She's just a stray dog who will swallow her pride and pop out the kids. The ballroom descended into utter, apocalyptic pandemonium. Oh my God! A senator's wife shrieked, dropping her glass. Is this real? He used his wife as an illegal surrogate for 4 women. Delilah's father stood up, his face purple with rage, pointing a shaking finger at Carter. You bastard! You desecrated our daughter's memory to run a sick breeding circus. Sienna Montgomery was frantically trying to shield her face from the dozens of press cameras that had suddenly pivoted toward her table, their flashes strobing like lightning. Stop recording. Turn those off. It's a lie. It's all a lie. Vivian Moore rose from her seat like a striking cobra, her face contorted with corporate fury as she glared at Carter. You told me the surrogate was an anonymous third-party agency in California. You used your own legal wife. Do you have any idea what this does to our logistics merger, you idiot? Carter stood frozen in the center of the stage. The golden boy of the Sterling dynasty looked like a man who had been struck by a falling building. The color drained from his face until he looked like a corpse, his hands trembling violently at his sides. He slowly turned his head toward me. I stood there 3 feet away, holding my microphone with a steady hand. "Scarlett," Carter whispered, his voice cracking, a look of pure, unadulterated terror dawning in his eyes. What did you do?" I lifted the microphone to my lips. My voice calm, measured, and icy cut through the screaming crowd like a guillotine. "Happy 30th birthday, Carter," I said into the mic. "You wanted a legacy. Here it is." I reached into the pocket of my gown, pulled out my platinum wedding band, and dropped it onto the glass podium. It rolled twice and fell to the carpet with a soft final thud. "And as for the 4 children you bought with my body," I added, looking straight into the lenses of the 20 live broadcast cameras in the room, "you can collect them from the pathology lab." Carter's eyes widened to the point of tearing. "What did you say?" "I terminated the pregnancy 2 hours ago at St. Jude's Specialty Center under federal court protection." I lied smoothly, letting the absolute terror sink into his bones. "Your brood is dead, Carter. And so is your name." Carter let out a sound that didn't belong to a human being, a strangled, animalistic howl of rage and despair. "And oh," he screamed, lunging across the stage toward me with his fingers hooked like claws. "You didn't. You wouldn't." Before his hands could touch my dress, 4 armed federal marshals and 2 private security guards from Victoria Chen's team vaulted onto the stage, tackling Carter to the ground with brutal force. Slam. Carter's face hit the polished mahogany floorboards, his nose breaking on impact, blood smearing across his crisp white shirt. "Carter Sterling," the lead federal marshal shouted, twisting Carter's arms. Behind his back as heavy steel handcuffs clicked shut around his wrists. "You are under arrest for federal wire fraud, conspiracy to commit human trafficking, non-consensual medical exploitation, and felony forgery." "Scarlett! Scarlett!" Carter shrieked from the floor, spitting blood and saliva, thrashing like a rabid dog against the marshal's knees. "You killed my babies. You murdered my children. You bitch. You crazy bitch." I didn't look down at him. I turned on my heel and walked calmly down the stage steps. The crowd parted before me as if I were a queen walking through a field of wheat. Billionaires, socialites, and reporters pressed themselves against the walls, looking at me with a mixture of profound shock and sheer terror. As I passed Sienna's table, she was on her knees, sobbing hysterically as her mother slapped her across the face in front of the entire assembly. As I passed Celine, 2 female police officers were already securing her wrists in plastic zip ties, confiscating her iPad and purse as corporate evidence for corporate conspiracy. I pushed through the grand double doors of the ballroom and stepped out into the cool, clean autumn night air. A specialized private medical transport was waiting at the curb with its emergency lights flashing. Victoria Chen stood beside the open door, holding a warm cashmere coat. "The court injunction is finalized," Victoria said, wrapping the coat around my shoulders. "The clinic director at Apex Fertility was arrested 10 minutes ago. The federal judge granted full asset freezes on Carter's personal accounts, and the press has already published the leaked files to every major financial outlet in the country." "And the hospital?" I asked, breathing in the rain-washed air. "Dr. Vance is waiting in the surgical wing at St. Jude's," Victoria said gently. "Everything is prepared. Are you ready, Scarlett?" I looked down at my massive, heavy belly one last time. Inside, 4 heartbeats were still fluttering. Heartbeats that had been placed there by greed, vanity, betrayal, and cowardice. "I'm ready," I said. "Take them out." The surgical suite at St. Jude's was cold, sterile, and quiet. The bright overhead lights shone against the brushed stainless steel equipment. 2 anesthesiologists and 3 high-risk obstetric surgeons moved with hushed, solemn efficiency around the operating table. Scarlett, Dr. Vance, a woman with kind gray eyes and 30 years of surgical experience, rested a gentle, gloved hand on my forehead. "Because of your gestational age and the quadruplet volume, a standard chemical termination is too dangerous for your uterine integrity. We are performing an emergency selective hysterotomy under full general anesthesia. We will extract the non-consensually implanted gestational tissue, repair your uterine lining, and preserve your reproductive health for your own future." "Do what you have to do, doctor," I whispered, feeling the cold sting of the 4 sedative entering the vein in my right forearm. "Breathe deeply, Scarlett," the anesthesiologist murmured, placing a soft silicone mask over my nose and mouth. "When you wake up, the nightmare will be over." I closed my eyes. The heavy, suffocating pressure that had weighed down my lungs for 6 months began to drift away into a vast, painless dark. When I opened my eyes again, the world was bathed in soft, golden morning light. The room smelled of fresh eucalyptus and clean linen. A light autumn breeze ruffled the sheer curtains of the private recovery suite. I lay on the bed, my body wrapped in a firm, supportive abdominal compression binder. I slowly lifted my trembling hand and placed it flat against my stomach. It was flat. The monstrous, distended weight was gone. The kicking, the nausea, the tearing. Pain in my pelvic bones vanished. A single tear slipped from the corner of my eye, tracing down my cheek and soaking into the pillow. It wasn't a tear of grief. It was the first breath of a prisoner walking out of the iron gates into the sun. "You're awake," a quiet, warm voice spoke from the corner. Victoria Chin was sitting in an armchair, sipping black coffee, an iPad resting on her lap. How long was I out? I croaked, my throat dry. Victoria stood up, poured a glass of warm water with a straw, and held it to my lips. 18 hours. The surgery was a complete success. Dr. Vance said your uterine wall had minimal scarring. You are completely healthy, Scarlett. And you are entirely free. I took 3 long sips of water, feeling the cool liquid soothe my parched throat. What's happening outside? Victoria let out a low, dry chuckle and turned the iPad screen toward me. The headlines scrolling across the screen looked like a war zone. Sterling Group shares plunged 68% following massive surrogacy fraud arrests. More Logistics terminates $400 million maritime contract with Sterling Dynasty. Sienna Montgomery dropped from charity boards. Family announces indefinite exile to Europe. Former Secretary Celine Croft indicted on corporate espionage and extortion charges. Apex Fertility Clinic license revoked under Federal Human Exploitation Act. Carter? I asked. Denied bail, Victoria said, tapping the screen. The federal judge deemed him a severe flight risk. His father, Richard Sterling, suffered a minor stroke yesterday morning and officially removed Carter from all corporate trusts and board seats to protect the remaining family assets. Carter is currently sitting in a 6x8 cell at the Metropolitan Detention Center awaiting trial on 11 federal counts. Victoria pulled a thick leather folder from her briefcase and placed it on my bedside table. Pursuant to the Emergency Fault-Based Divorce Decree finalized this morning, under the Marital Fraud and Bodily Harm Act, Victoria said with professional pride, the court awarded you 75% of Carter's personal liquid assets, the full ownership of the downtown commercial real estate portfolio, and $50 million in punitive damages drawn directly from the Sterling Family Trust. I looked at the gold seal on the court documents. $75 million. Complete legal emancipation. What happened to the tissues? I asked quietly. Handed over to the Federal Department of Forensic Pathology as primary evidence. For the criminal trial, Victoria replied gently. They will be sealed in federal biostorage until the legal proceedings conclude, after which they will be cremated pursuant to medical waste protocols. None of those women will ever touch a single cell of their vanity projects. I leaned back against the pillows, closed my eyes, and let out a long, slow exhale. The debt had been collected in full. 3 months later, the winter snow had blanketed the city in a thick layer of pristine white. I sat in the private glass-walled consultation room of the Metropolitan Detention Center, wearing a tailored cream cashmere coat, dark leather gloves, and oversized sunglasses. The heavy steel door across from me buzzed open. Carter Sterling was led into the room by 2 armed correctional officers. He was unrecognizable. The immaculate, golden boy billionaire who used to spend $3,000 on a single haircut was gone. He wore a faded, oversized orange prison jumpsuit. His hair buzzed down to the scalp, revealing hollow, sunken temples. His jaw was crooked where the broken bone had healed improperly without luxury cosmetic surgery, and his wrists were chafed raw beneath heavy steel transport cuffs. When he saw me sitting there radiant, healthy, glowing with life and wealth, his bloodshot eyes flared with a desperate, wild madness. He threw himself into the metal chair across the table, his chains rattling loudly against the steel. Scarlett. Carter rasped, his voice cracking into a ragged, pathetic sob. Scarlett. You came. I knew you'd come. I didn't speak. I simply sat there, looking at him with the cool detachment of a scientist observing an insect beneath a microscope. Scarlett, please, Carter wept, leaning forward, pressing his cuffed hands against the table as if trying to reach across the glass. You have to tell the prosecutors to drop the human trafficking charges. If I'm convicted on the federal counts, I'm looking at 25 years at ADX Florence. My father won't even take my calls. They took my company, Scarlett. They took my money. I have nothing left. You have 25 years to reflect on your genius, Carter, I said calmly. I did it for us, he suddenly screamed, his face contorting with hysterical rage. I did it so we could have money. I did it so we could secure the more contracts. I never loved Celine. I never loved Sienna. You were my wife. Everything I built was for our future. I let out a quiet, genuine laugh. A sound so pure and unbothered that it struck Carter like a physical slap across the mouth. Do you remember what you told Tyler that afternoon behind the door? I asked him softly. Carter froze, his breath catching in his throat. You said I was a stray dog, I murmured, leaning forward slightly, taking off my sunglasses so he could look directly into my clear, untroubled eyes. You said that no matter how mad I got, all you had to do was wiggle your finger, and I would come crawling back. Carter's face went from pale to an ashen, mottled gray. You said I was thick-skinned, I continued. You said I didn't feel pain. You sat on the couch with your mistress while your car rocked in my driveway, betting $10 million on how many boys I would pop out for your dead ex-girlfriend and your billionaire friends. Scarlett, forgive me. Carter broke down completely, slamming his forehead against the metal table, sobbing like a broken child. I was stupid. I was arrogant. Please, just give me one more chance. I love you, Scarlett. I swear to God. I realize now you are the only woman who ever truly loved me. I stood up slowly, smoothing the wrinkles from my cashmere coat. You don't know what love is, Carter, I told him, looking down at his trembling, pathetic form. You only know ownership. And now you own a 6x8 concrete box. I picked up my leather handbag and turned toward the exit door. Scarlett, Scarlett, don't leave me. Carter screamed, thrashing against his chair as the two guards stepped forward, pinning his shoulders to the table. Look at me. Look at me once. Scarlett. I didn't turn back. I knocked on the heavy security door, stepped through the steel threshold, and walked down the long, bright corridor into the winter afternoon. 1 year later. The southern coast of France was warm and bathed in golden spring sunlight. The turquoise waters of the Mediterranean lapped gently against the white stone balustrade of my private villa terrace in Villefranche-sur-Mer. The air smelled of blooming jasmine, sea salt, and fresh espresso. Inside the sunlit studio, my new architectural design firm, Vanguard Living, was already finalizing its third sustainable luxury resort project for the European Union. I sat at the outdoor teak table, wearing a simple linen sundress, sketching a floor plan while sipping fresh orange juice. My phone on the table chimed softly. It was an encrypted email from Victoria Chin. Scarlett. Final disposition report. Carter Sterling was sentenced this morning to 22 years in federal prison without parole. Celine Croft received 7 years for corporate extortion. Sienna Montgomery's family declared bankruptcy last month following the collapse of their social investment fund. Your final corporate asset transfers have cleared the Swiss banking registry. You are fully unencumbered. Enjoy the sunshine. I closed the email with a single tap of my finger. I looked up at the endless blue sky stretching over the open horizon. The scars on my abdomen had faded into faint, silvery lines, not marks of shame, but battle ribbons from a war I had fought and won with my own hands. My body belonged to me. My wealth belonged to me. My future belonged to me. I picked up my pencil, smiled at the blank white canvas before me, and began to draw the world anew.